Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to ESP Speaks. Tonight, we're going to be continuing with our health series, Your Health and What's on Your Mind. I'd like to introduce you to someone who is so special. His name is Shay Johnson, and he is going to join us on this journey of mental wellness. He's one of Psychology Today's verified and featured psychotherapists. Take a look.
Hi, my name is Shay Johnson, and I'm a clinical psychotherapist. I might be the right clinical psychotherapist for you. Let's go on a journey together to discover a greater you.
So, family, please help me welcome Shay Johnson. You out there? There you go.
Yes, I am. Hello.
How are you? Oh,
I'm well.
goodness.
So good to see you. You're looking
So
beautiful.
wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I know that you had a birthday recently. You look fabulous.
Yeah. The big 50. And that's not 50 for the popo. That's 50 for 50.
Oh my goodness. Well, I got news for you. It's not that big of a deal. So enjoy it.
Right.
It's going to be a breeze.
Well, thank you. All my friends, I mean, I love my 40s, but the 50s, all my friends are like, it's even better. I'm like, all right.
I'm enjoying my 50s as well. You're coming fully into self.
Yeah.
It's like everything is well-rounded.
Yeah.
So I want to get to certain things so I can sit back and just let you go because, you're just wonderful and so knowledgeable, and our guests our family audience really needs to connect with you. So I'm going to stop talking very soon.
Okay.
There is a big question that before we step forward in anything else, there's a big question that I'd like to pose, and I know it's going to help our audience out.
Mm-hmm.
What's the difference between psychology and psychiatry? Because I believe this is what keeps, particularly the Black community, this kind of keeps them away from the whole process.
Yeah.
So let's clear that up for them.
No, it's a very important question, and I have to tell you something. You'd be surprised when we first start school, graduate school. A lot of us need to have that explained to us because we don't understand it in trying to find our professional path, right? So everything kind of started out in what one of my mentors, Marianne Diaz, says, therapy land, right? So it started out with psychiatry. So there was first a medical model. So a psychiatrist is someone who goes to medical school. They are a full medical doctor, right? Their specialty is not surgery, but they have the full general knowledge that a medical doctor has. And then they go into specialized in psychiatry. So the psychiatrist is going to understand certain things that are happening in the brain, when there's certain behaviors occurring or certain feelings and moods that people changes. The psychiatrist is going to know the biological reasons why that's happening, and they're going to be able to prescribe certain medications that will help with that. But it's an ongoing practice, and unlike the more holistic model of the osteopath, which is an older model for doctors, which you look at the whole person and you're working with the whole person, the medical model becomes very specialized, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have, this particular doctor who's an oncologist for cancer, and this doctor who's a gynecologist for this, and then, you have all kind prostate doctor, all that stuff, right? So that's the specialization. So the psychiatrist, if you were having a situation where there was schizophrenia, or you had a paranoia, or there was some mental disorder that was actually making it so that you couldn't function, you would go to a psychiatrist, the medical doctor, and they would look at your behavior, they'd watch you, and then they would prescribe medication that would alter your brain chemistry so that you wouldn't have that. Now, the problem with that is that we know, as soul folk, Black folk, we know that these medical models have really, really pathologized us, and they've also experimented on us, and they've done all these things that are not ethical, right? And so we're very wary of this kind of practice. And the psychiatrist and the psychologist and the clinical psychotherapist, which is what I am, they get all mixed up because we have that thing of laying down on the couch, and the whole that's the old psychiatry model, right? So the difference between the psychiatrist and the psychologist is they're both doctors, but one is a medical doctor and the other one has a doctorate degree in psychology. So they either have a PhD or what's called a PsyD.
Mm-hmm.
And that doctorate degree it's advanced study in treatment and looking at the psyche. So they can't prescribe drugs. What they're really specialized in is working with, seeing disorders and treating disorders and that kind of thing. So the psychiatrist is looking at solving problems in mood and behavior solely as a medical problem. That's the psychiatrist, right? The psychologist is looking at all kinds of things. How is the society affecting the individual? How does the family system affect the individual? How does medical stuff affect the individual? All these things are being taken into account. So, yeah, go ahead.
So the psychologist is for the everyday person.
Yes.
And as far as what you're saying, we should all be engaging in some sort of psychotherapy at some point, because we're all dealing with some issue.
Right. Now, it's interesting that you say that we should all be engaging, because I've been treating people at Southern California Counseling Center in Los Angeles for over 2 years. And this center was started by a psychiatrist and a psychologist.
Mm.
And this was before they had my degree, which is the marriage and family therapist, the master's, right, of psychology.
Mm-hmm.
Before we had clinical psychotherapists, where our sole job is to really engage psychotherapy, right? What they realized, they were like, we both I've got a medical degree, doctorate, you've got a doctorate, PhD. And we both know that there are many people, we could train people in the community to really help others to, and they could be doing therapy. So what they realized was they just changed the whole model and said, the community needs more therapy, and we're going to train people vocationally to do this. So that's over 50 years ago that happened. And then, about 40 years ago, you started getting the masters in social work. So social workers start coming along and being able to do clinical psychotherapy. And then the marriage and family therapists can do clinical psychotherapy. So what I do is really, really so a psychiatrist, the doctor, can prescribe drugs. Psychologists, they can do all the testing. They can test you for ADD. They can test you for dyslexia. They can test you for, if you have, schizophrenia. They can test you for things like that. But what I do is I'm here to do therapy. and I'm here to assess. There may be times when I assess something and say, okay, you might need to talk to a psychiatrist because, as I look at you, I'm starting to notice that your depression is not just about the circumstances. There's something else going on here. So like, I might notice after working with somebody for a year that they have seasonal, when certain seasons change, they get depressed or they get anxious.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not within my scope of practice to tell them to prescribe, to diagnose them. But what I can do is I can say, it might be helpful to get a medical exam so we can see what's going on with that. And then I would coordinate with the psychiatrist. But a lot of what I'm here to do, honestly, is just talking. And, talking is so powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Being in communion with another person is so extraordinary,
What a
So
lovely segue to what I was about to ask you.
Okay.
We are in, as far as I'm concerned, we are in a psychotherapy deluge right now. COVID-19 has put us all in a phase of life where if you're living by yourself, you're being forced to confront yourself. If you're living with a family, you're being forced to confront your family. If you were in a job that you were a constant workaholic, you're being forced to look at the fact that you're not working right now, or you're not working in the same capacity, and you were a workaholic and you need to change how you're doing. If you were a lazy person, you're basically being forced to have all of these people around you that are telling you that you're lazy. This COVID-19 restart of life, or reset of life, has put us all in a psychological state of affairs that needs to be addressed. We all, even the children, Shay, need therapy. I have a teenager still living in the house, and he's so afraid that he won't go outside of the virus.
Sure.
We're all gaining weight. We're all there are so many psychological levels to this one virus.
Yes.
And this is why it was so important for me to have you on today, because I can think of 50 people that watch this show off the top of my head that are going to be contacting you after this.
Hey, yeah. Well, one of the things that we're going to be doing is, because we realize, I can't see 50 people, but what I can do is I can see 50 people in talks and big, bigger seminars like this. And then we will be conducting group therapies and things like that. So I'll be able to give you resources for New York. There's so many amazing therapists in New York. That's where I started as a kid going to therapy, it's interesting that you say this. I think about 2020 as 2020 vision, right? It's like we got the prescription and we got the clear vision, and then what we saw is like, oh my Lord. I mean, it's been one shocking revelation after another of how difficult things really are. I think the election is just another lesson of like, well, we're good enough not to be this, but we really have a lot we have a lot of work to do. Yes. I think that a lot of this, the pandemic has forced us to see ourselves. And, let me tell you, a lot of therapy is being able to see the problem. I practice a narrative form of therapy. And so the narrative therapy is looking at the stories that we tell ourselves. And looking at the stories that we have been told to tell ourselves. And a lot of what the opportunity of this pandemic has forced us to look at all these stories that we have been told, and a lot of the stories that we tell ourselves, and so this is a big change, and it's a traumatic change. A lot of people, so I think people are familiar with, if you had any kind of little psychological whatever in college or sometimes high school, they talk about Pavlov's dogs, right? So, Pavlov, he was a behavioralist, and he did this thing where he'd ring a bell and he'd feed the dog, and ring a bell and feed the dogs. And he'd do all these experiments on the dogs to see their behavior, right? So ultimately, he could ring the bell and the dogs would salivate because they just knew the food
They
was
knew.
coming. Right? They were trained, they were conditioned, right? And so what people don't know is that there was a flood in Pavlov's laboratory, and it was traumatic. And the dogs that survived, he'd ring the bell, and they would no longer salivate. They no longer had that conditioned response. The trauma broke the conditioned response.
Wow.
And so, you know, a lot of what we're seeing is this is that 2020. It's a breaker. It's breaking a lot of our conditioned responses. And it, you know, I thought it only would have to last for 5 months, and then that would be enough for us to really break this conditioning. But you know, we're stubborn, and our timeout is lasting a little bit longer than any of us would want it to be. And a lot of it is just that there's, you know, someone talked about post-traumatic stress disorder, but then there's post-traumatic stress growth, right? PTSG, you know, where like you really grow because you've been kind of shocked into stopping. Yeah. So that's the positive side of it. The negative side is not, I won't say negative, but the challenge is simultaneously we are traumatized, and trauma carries its own set of difficulties. And, you know, we can go into what trauma does. You know, I mean, a lot of the things about trauma is that if we are traumatized and we don't process the trauma, and usually we process trauma in community, we process trauma when people empathize with us, we process trauma when we realize we're being heard, and then we can see ourselves. But if we don't do that, it gets stuck in a part of our brain called the amygdala, which is basically like your short-term memory. So you're constantly reliving it as if you feel like you can't forget about it. And yeah.
That's so interesting. And here's why. I had a series of questions that I wanted to ask you. And as you're talking, because I'm engaged so deeply in what you're saying, I'm hearing the answers to the questions, but I realize, wait a minute, you got to ask them. So I want to ask you, particularly in what you just said, there is a question that was sent in by one of my readers a couple of months ago, and I want to read this to you.
Sure.
How can clinical psychotherapy, which is what you're talking about, that's my part of the question, how does what you do now aid to what she's talking about here? How can clinical psychotherapy help with a multi-generational trauma? Now I'm going to list a set of traumas because I hear about this repeatedly in a lot of my groups.
Sure.
The slave trade, plantation enslavement, Jim Crow mentality, redlining, these police murders that up to this day we're still going through this police trauma. Basically, systemic racism. How do we apply clinical psychology into helping people deal with these subject matters?
That's fantastic. So I'll tell you a couple of things. Is it helps us. As psychotherapy has really grown and starting to embrace, I call it, you know, Jedi justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, right? Social justice, social Jedi. We're starting to realize that we have to apply our lens to observe what's happening. And the first step is really getting to see what the problem is and how the problem affects us. And then the second part of that is the treatment. So I'm going to quote another amazing clinical psychotherapist. His name is Resmaa Menakem. And Resmaa Menakem has a book called My Grandmother's Hands. And if you don't know about this book, you better ask somebody. My Grandmother's Hands is an amazing book. And what he does is he catalogs how this multi-generational trauma has moved through our lives, and he shows how it affects white people, and it shows how it affects Black people, and he has models, and he actually has a specific model for police, but he shows how when we are traumatized, we, over generations and generations, it traumatizes our ability to have empathy sometimes for ourselves and for others. And so there's a whole list of things that he really brings in to try to help us understand that. And I will say very quickly that if you look at what happened in the medieval period, you have Europeans kind of devolving into a very, very mean way to treat each other. They started torturing each other. They killed 1/3 of all the women. So the patriarchy is really developing. All these wise women doing all this earth medicine, the midwives birthing babies, using lavender, healing people, keeping people safe. And they just killed them all because the church was afraid of the power of the women, right? You also have Arab culture doing very similar things to women over this 1,000-year period. And you also have the Crusades. So the Arab and European cultures are doing horrible things to each other. And one of the things that Resmaa Menakem says is over generations, when you do cruel things, not only do you traumatize the person you do them to, but you traumatize your own morality. You traumatize your own sense of ethics. You traumatize your own ability to be empathetic, because if you keep harming others, how are you going to survive unless you've numbed your empathy, right? So all this happens, and then you get this big surge of the colonial project going out. Because, you know, my sister, when she went to the Door of No Return in Ghana, she was like, how is it possible that you could take people through this door and put them on these ships and treat them like how is that possible, right? And it's because over this 1,000-year period, the morality, the empathy had been demoralized, had been traumatized. So then you have the trauma that Europeans and Arabs have done to themselves and each other. They now import it to the whole world. These are the only two cultures where you see people enslaving Africans and other people in chattel slavery, like not just for like, we conquered you, you're the slave, and your kids are free, and you get an education, they get an education, and they're part of the society. No, this is like, we own you, we own your kids, all that. Okay, so that's a demoralized, traumatized character that enables that to happen. So then they bring this to the whole world. They enslave Africans, bring us over here, genocide the native peoples, right? So now we're at a place where everybody has been traumatized, and everybody is traumatized in a multi-generational way. You have people of European descent, white people, which Resmaa Menakem, he talked about white body supremacy and white body racism. He's like, it's in the bodies. The traumatization, it's actually in the body. It's not just mental. Like, we're traumatized. Our bodies are. We now know that, you know, Dr. Candace Pert was this amazing molecular biologist who discovered how we have polypeptide bonds in the mitochondrial DNA, that we pass on blood memory, right? We pass on traumatic memories to our offspring. So it's multi-generational biologically, and it's multi-generational experientially, right? We all know the stories of how we were beaten, our parents were beaten, our grandparents were beat by our families because we had enslavers beating our ancestors. So instead of really disciplining in a different way. So it's this traumatization of our morality, of our empathy, is something that we're all dealing with now. So that's the first part, is to really see what has happened. And then the next part is treatment. And we have a lot of things. We're learning more and more about trauma every day. We're learning about where it's stored in the brain, how it can move. It can be changed in the brain from one place to another so that it's no longer seizing us up. How our brains can heal from trauma, how we heal in community, how we are now learning about EMDR, which is the eye movements, desensitization, right? And that when we flick back and forth between something painful and something pleasurable, that we actually get an ability to kind of hold it and handle it and process it. So one of the things that Resma Menakem has done is he has groups for Black women to sit together and heal the trauma together. He has groups for Black men. He has groups for Black people. He has groups for white people. He has groups for police officers because they have a specific trauma in that police weren't designed to be doing what they're doing right now. They were designed for something else. So they're traumatized and always on edge. And if
Be
they have
more specific about that. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah.
But that was a big, there are a couple of poignant points, but you're in such a flow that I feel badly to interject.
That's all right. Let's go in. Let's dig in.
There's a point, the point in traumatization in terms of how it's basically in our DNA at this juncture.
Yes. Right.
My question, I have several questions. My question was, is it affecting everybody broad spectrum, and how? Because, okay, we originally started with people of color, and the question was based on people of color. How do we step past this, or how do we deal with this? But from what you're saying, people of Caucasian descent are dealing with it as well.
Yep. Well, obviously, if they can
in
do
their
these
lack of
horrible
empathy.
things.
That's part one.
Yeah, right.
Wow. The last part that you were just talking about, which I kind of lost the stream in myself in explaining, with the cops.
Yes.
You said that this is not what they're designed to do. Be more specific with what you're talking about in this was not designed. Because a lot of people don't understand that the racial effects that they are seeing with regard to police officers is basically built on the fact that police officers were built to do exactly what they're doing right now. Putting their foot on our neck is what the original part of policing was about.
That's right. That's right.
So
yeah.
Wow.
Well, let's talk about that. Let's talk about what they were designed to do. You got the constabulary, right? The constables in England and stuff like that, right? And then you have policing, and policing in the United States. These are militias that were hired to go after runaway, Africans who had run away from enslavement and hunt them down, right? Mm-hmm. So that was the design of it, was to enforce, the rich white landowners' property, right? Reclaiming the property. And then, in the North, you had more of a constabulary system where you had police that were being brought in to patrol neighborhoods and kind of, make sure that they were, safe, right? But in England, people hated these constables because they usually, unfortunately, weren't in the neighborhoods. They were coming from outside the neighborhoods, coming in, and who are you coming in to police me? What is this policing? What is going on? So what has happened is, over time, police in white neighborhoods, they lived in the neighborhoods, everybody knew them. They were just kind of there for public safety, right? But it's always been the model for people of color to enforce, to see us as dangerous, and then enforce this controlling of our bodies, right? That's part of the sickness of being demoralized, the European morality being traumatized, is that they have this unbelievable traumatized morality and then project it on all their shadows onto people of African descent, right? So African bodies, Black bodies, we're having a totally different experience as the ones having all this negativity projected on us. So we see ourselves in a bad light, even though we also see ourselves in a good light. And, we know that the danger of white body racism, that in their bodies, they're still traumatized. They just want to destroy us, or they think the best thing we can ever be is of service to them and keeping them comfortable. But they don't see us as human beings. They think that we're impervious to harm. They think our bodies are, they got all these fantasies about us, right? And so that's their multi-generational trauma, right? That's is that they've lost their sense of actually ability to see things, right?
Wow. We just dealt with that in the medical series, because I have a midwife and family services on in my last show, healthcare practitioner for women. She was talking about how when women go into the hospitals, our pain management is damn nearly void, because they think that we're these super beings and we don't require pain medication.
Yeah.
And they're giving birth and they're not giving them the right dosage. Whew. Okay, listen,
Yeah.
family.
No, but
This this
but these
is
are all, it's all
amazing.
interconnected. I love that you
Yes.
brought that up because it's all interconnected. The way that, listen, there was a time, there's a reason why we don't trust therapists as Black folks. Come on. There
Okay,
was a
but you
time,
know what? They got to wait for that. We got to take a commercial break and pay some bills. They
all
got to
right,
wait for that. So, family,
absolutely.
we are talking to psychotherapist Shay Johnson. Stay with us. We'll be back in a minute. Don't go anywhere with ESP Speaks. All right.
Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets. When I'm performing, never boring, now you can't afford it. Champagne Perrier, finished friends on my face. Looking like I'm from the deep. These no Cartiers. Pockets deep, 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 bro. I can make it in my seat, bro. Do you, I'm doing me, bro. Making noise, use a peep.
Happy birthday to you. Yeah. Happy birthday. Make a wish. I know she ain't about.
Ew.
Oh my goodness.
Please don't do that. Oh, no, she ain't.
That's not right.
No bueno.
No cake for me.
Yikes.
Fana Cake is the cool new sanitary way to blow out the candles on your cake.
Make a wish.
I love my Fana Cake.
Fana Cake rock.
I want some cake.
That's cool.
Get yours today at fanacake.com.
What? Don't you see me? What are you laughing at? Really?
Okay, wait. I got a joke for y'all. Okay.
Oh, I love jokes.
So, a woman calls the airline. She says, I want to take my dog on a flight. What do I need? So, they told her that she would need a kennel. And the kennel has to be big enough for the dog to stand, sit, turn around, and everything. So, the customer then said, oh my God, I can't teach him all of that by tomorrow. That ain't funny. It is. What you mean that's not funny? What you got? Okay. A woman sees her husband standing on the scale and he's sucking in his gut. And she says, that's not going to help. And he goes, yes, it will. That's the way I can see the numbers.
Wah, wah.
Okay. That was pretty good. I got one.
Yeah, I have one.
Wait, now you want a shot too?
Of course I do.
Okay, I bought one of those tapes that help you learn Spanish overnight. Well, during the night, the tape skipped and now I can only stutter in Spanish.
Por favor.
Wait. I got one. Y'all knew we weren't going to escape without Zoe putting her 5 cents in.
Of course. Yeah, that's right.
Zoe. So, okay, 2 women are talking. One woman says, my son wants to be a garbage man when he grows up. The other woman said, that's an unusual profession for a young boy. She says, no, he thinks they only work on Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Zoe, you are a fool.
Girl, I guess you are good for something. Oh,
I guess
my
so.
God.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Up, you can't ignore it. I'm transforming now these cars and planes, I'm always boarding. Just out touring down in Charlotte like I play for Hornets. When I'm performing, never boring, now you can't afford it.
Welcome back. We're here with ESP and we are sitting with the fabulous psychotherapist, Shay Johnson. I tell you, this has really been an education for me. And it's been a cleansing for me as well, because to hear some of the ideas coming from him, I'm connecting with our people and what we need and what you need. So, as we continue on this journey with Shay, I want you to really open your minds to the thought process of getting involved in your own therapy and using this time in 2020 in this COVID pandemic to find that cleansing place in yourself so that we can move forward when we need to move forward. So nobody's here to hear me talk. Let's get back to Shay Johnson, psychotherapist, and enjoy the cleansing. Take us on that journey, Jay.
All right. Well, hey, I thank you for introducing me again. And I just want to say that, I work, my supervisor is the amazing Barbara Herring of Just Be Therapy. You can check out justbetherapy.com. And she is just really helping me open up. I thought I was doing well, but she's like just guiding me into bigger and better places and deeper places that to work for and in the African diaspora, to really get us as Black folks to get into some of these things that we don't necessarily want to talk about. So I just wanted to mention a shout out to B, as we affectionately call Barbara Herring. Yes,
that's wonderful, and it just leads. It's psycho. You're just segueing me into these wonderful psychological questions that I want to ask you, because here's the biggest one for me.
Okay.
Why are so many people of color? I get the disconnect with the DNA and how we've been traumatized. I get that. But come on, at some point, we're adults. We have to grow. We have to move forward. I didn't say let go, but we got to do something for ourselves, because we can't continue to live in this muck and this mire that this whole situation has caused. We have to desire a way to move forward and get out of it. So tell me, please, why the Black community cannot see the value of psychotherapy and what it can do for them to raise them up?
Well, because we're too smart to fall for it. I mean, let me tell you something. We see the value in therapy, but we also see the danger. I don't think that it has really been safe for us as a community to go to therapists until recently. I mean, we are now training more therapists of color. Not only that, but we have those first therapists of color that were coming out in the 60s and 70s and 80s are now fostering others to do the same thing, and they're changing the whole game. And I think that as a people, we were smart. We saw. There was a time when doctors would say that if you were a slave and you didn't want to be a slave, you had a disorder. You had a mental disorder.
Wow.
Right. So why would we want to go to somebody like that for anything?
That's deep. I've never heard that until today.
Oh yeah. It was a mental disorder for a slave who wasn't adjusted to, their place. So I mean, there's a reason why we don't do this, because we instinctually know that whatever dysfunction we have, we're better off not. We'll just have to get through it. But now things have changed a little bit. You know what I mean? Now we have we have organizations of Black therapists. We have therapists of color who come together. We have multicultural therapists who are mixed or in mixed relationships, who specialize in doing couples therapy for mixed relationships. I mean, we are really moving in a bigger way to accommodate our people. We finally get it that this is helpful. It just was not helpful for us. And now we are making it helpful for us. So as I think, as we start to wake up to that as a people and start turning to, let me tell you, some great white therapists out there, really are, who are really listening. And the best white therapists that I know are the ones who say, I'm probably not the right person. I can help you so far in this, but there's going to be a point where you really need the empathy of a person who's had a lived experience. And we didn't have a lot of us. Yeah, we that's real. That's real talk.
It's amazing that one would be that truthful to just come out front and say that. Listen, you need one of your own.
Yeah. Because I mean, they've had their own. If you're a white person, you can just go to a white therapist, and all these experiences that they grew up with and you grew up with, you can kind of relate, right? But I mean, you know, I've had many therapists. You'll find there's different times in your life. Like I had to have a Black woman therapist. That's what I had to have for a long time, you know? And then I was able to move into different, I actually have a white man therapist now, because as therapists, we have therapists, because I want to deal with my issues with white men now. So, okay, because I'm ready to deal with that and be like, you know what, I'm scared. And I want to be able to say, I don't like these things about white men. I'm having a problem with it. And I want to be able to find the strength to do, that's where I'm at in my therapy right now. But I mean, when I first started out, I needed a Black woman. And I wish I had had a Black man, you know, at the time. And I mean, Black woman therapists are very rare, and Black men therapists are unicorns. We're like, you know, but it's changing. It's changing. We're getting to a place where, you know, we're starting to proliferate and get into this community, so that if you go to psychology today, you can find somebody like me, you know, and that's something that I really, you know, I'm really looking for young people who need therapy, who are people of color, especially Black folks, who need to be able to talk about things that I'm going to understand. I understand instinctively how scary it is to be pulled over by police, because it's happened to me. When the guns get pulled out, you know, they see my shaved head and they don't know what I am, and then they see my face and they pull out guns, you know. So I get it, you know.
Let's deal with that for a minute, because that brings up another question. It's clear the experiences that we've been dealing with as Black people that are coming to the forefront, and people are still in this day and age going, oh, really? Oh my God. Yes, you just saw a man lynched on television, but we knew about that for years. So the Black experience is now coming to the forefront, and Black lives matter now.
Right.
What about, because we've always been talking about the white experience, we don't have to put a focus on that right at this moment.
No.
What about the mixed experience? Because we have so many biracial children and biracial adults who they're having an ambivalent experience where, well, my mom is white, my dad is Black, or my dad is white, my mom is Black, and I'm a mixed child, and I go out and these things are happening to me, and why are they happening to me? Because I'm identifying as being Caucasian, or why, you understand, that's a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
so
it's a lot.
As a therapist, because there's a flock of children that I just put in your hand with that statement.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
What are we seeing with that demographic of, or I shouldn't use demographic, with that racial grouping of children? Because it must be hell for them right now to find, where am I in this whole spectrum, and how am I being treated?
Right.
That's a question, but there's a whole nother level of the question that comes to mind in my asking that question. So let's let you deal with that first part.
All right. You know, I'm ready to go into different levels.
I know.
I will say this, you know, right. I'm there. I'm here for it. I will say this, you know, as a black man who is a mixed Black man, right? So I have a Jewish mother and a Black father. My parents were married for 51 years until my father passed, right? Thank you. You know, I can tell you, I'm from what's called the loving generation, right? So in 1965, it was Loving versus Virginia, right? This family called Loving. It was a mixed family, white man, and Black and Indian woman, right? And they went to the Supreme Court, and finally this kind of marriage became legal in all 50 states. So when my parents got married, they got married before this ruling in 65, and it was illegal, right? For them to get married. They got married in New York, but they couldn't. My father was from Mississippi. They wouldn't be legally married in Mississippi, right? So the loving generation, those of us born from like 65 to 85, we were raised as Black. We were raised like it was just like, look, you're not going to get treated white. There is a big disparity in the way that you're treated. you're black. So we were raised to, you know, not really embrace any kind of white identity because it wasn't anything that was practical. So, you know, Mariah Carey, you ask Mariah Carey, she'll tell you she's black, right? Or Barack Obama will say he's black. Halle Berry will say she's black, right? So you have, you know, Bob Marley, he says he's black, you know, because even though each of these people that I mentioned has a white parent, it just wasn't something that we had. So now, and I just lost your video. I don't know, they'll come back. But, oh, did I lose the audio too? There we go. All right.
Little
So
technical difficulty. Sorry about that.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, you know, Zoom and COVID is a great equalizer. I don't care how professional it is. We all, you know, I love it.
That's exactly what had happened. Somebody else just decided they wanted to Zoom me, and I don't have a lock on my Zoom because, you know, I just love everybody.
Right.
I'm so sorry. Go ahead.
That's all good. No, I get it. I love it. But that's real. That's the real deal. I love it. So yeah, so, you know, now we have kids being born after 85. They're starting to have a different idea of their racial identity. And all this is a story that's been thrown on us that we have to believe, right? You know, we people have been mixing forever. You know, everybody's mixed. So many people are mixed. You know, almost every black person I know has at least Native American in them, or Asian, or European. I mean, we're all mixed people, right? But we're put in these racial categories. So I think that there is, you know, one of the things I talk about is just how you get thrown into these roles, right? We're assigned to, like when you looked at my birth certificate, I was assigned to male gender and I was assigned to black race, right? So I was assigned to gender and I was assigned to race. Now, if I didn't identify with either one of those things, too bad for me, right? So we're all thrown into these things. So one of the things I do is I help people in therapy to see the stories that we're being told about ourselves, and that those stories are being backed up with brute force. So you have to be able to, you think that if I think I'm gonna run out there and like act like I'm white, I'm going to have a very rude awakening. You know, I'm gonna have another think coming because if I think that, because I've got to deal with the reality of the story that is enforced by that brute force, right? Okay. So I help people to see, look, this is what's going on. This is the story that they're telling us, and this is how they're enforcing that story on us, right? But who are you? What's happening inside of you? So that you can get a sense of who you are, and you have to respect what's going on out there, the forces that are going on out there, so that you can deal with those forces. And you got to find an identity for yourself that really empowers you. So for me, like, it really empowers me to say I'm a mixed race black man, because I love being black so much. And I also am very proud that I'm mixed, that I have this mixture. You know, I really do. I really love being Jewish too. And one of the things I feel is so important is the pride in being black. It really, it takes me to another, it connects me with my ancestors. It connects me with the whole world. It connects me with the source of the original people here on this planet. So I'm very, very proud of it. And I feel there's so much pride and joy about being black, you know. And I also embrace being mixed. There's something very powerful about, in a lot of ways, I was raised behind enemy lines, you know, in the same way Barack Obama was. I get to see something else going on that other people who are black folks don't get to necessarily see. And so I feel there's a privilege that I have in that, because I'm a little more connected to things that, you know, it's like I got to peek around the corner. I'm not quite allowed to be in the room, but I can be in the room.
Yes.
Kind of, you know what I mean, for a minute. So I think that a lot of this, but those are all the stories that we're being told. The truth is I'm me, right? You know? And I have found my identity as a mixed race black man, because that's what works best for me. So I definitely work with my clients to acknowledge what's happening, acknowledge the stories, acknowledge how they're being enforced, and also like find out who you are. And don't fall for the story, because there's all these stories about negative stories about being Black. Don't fall for that. You know, if you are Black and white or and Asian or something else, find the positivity in being Black. Find the positivity in being Asian. Find the positivity in being both of those cultures. And so that you can decide for yourself a role that's not about what somebody else, you know, put on you.
Wonderful, wonderful. And that is a wonderful final thought. Once again, family, we have psychotherapist Shay Johnson with us, who has been just filling us with jewels for this entire hour. And it's not going to end here, because
No,
here's
it's
the
not. We got
wonderful
more to talk
thing.
about. I'm coming back.
Because we are going to have part 2 with Shay Johnson next week. So you need to stay tuned with us and come back to ESP Speaks. So I'm not even going to do my regular ending. You know what next week's show is. You know who we're going to be with. And what I want you to do this week, during the week, I'm going to put several polls up. Write your questions down so that we can ask Che the next time he comes on. And we're going to do a live show for you somewhere further down towards the end of the year, so you'll be able to talk to Che for yourself. But in the meantime, thanks for joining ESP Speaks. Thanks for being here. You know you're the loves of our lives. And remember, you know what I'm going to say. Be careful out there. Be positive. Test negative. We'll see you next week.
All right.